Try. We'll try our friend Zoom again. Um,
At least for today. We should probably like give Discord another shot when Windows isn't messing with my system.
mhm. Yeah, it's showing me high frames again. So we'll see. Um, Hi, folks. Welcome to the program. Sorry for the delay. We were attempting to find uh, a solution to our beloved Zoom, and but it seems that we didn't manage to do so. So we're gonna try once again, one last time with Zoom, and see what happens. Um, and I'm basically closing every single little screen or everything that could, take um, away from the bandwidth in the hopes that we don't have as many drop frames as we did before. Although it seems that might not be the case this time. Again, we're going to have it. So, welcome back to the Lessons Learned podcast. My friend here, Chapelmon. Tonight, we're going to talk about, of course, video games. And we're going to start with the news, as we almost always do. Um, well, first of all, I want to talk about I've been playing this week. It's just been very confusing. I've been going back and forth between games. I know people are like, could you just choose a game and stick with it? Because that would be good. That would be a good idea. Let's do that. I was playing Monster Hunter World on the PC, enjoying it, but I kind of found that I sort of hit my limit there. Like I found the limit to what I was really doing, and it didn't seem like a kind of game that I really didn't have to. Yeah, my internet connection is unstable according to Zoom and OBS. According to OBS, thank you OBS. Um,
Well, so apparently I'm getting that message too.
okay. Um, so there's that, and we and it was good, but the problem with it, I think, was that I didn't feel like I was very engaging in it while I was playing it. I just something about it. I would get into the fights and I would get to the running and jumping and doing all the things that the fights require. But aside from that, I was like, and this seems to be the whole of it, right? Um,
hmm
and I was like, well, um, could we have something more? And then I look at Origins and I said, well, I am playing another game, which is Dragon Age Inquisition, and I saw that they had a sale of all the three DLC for $14.99, $15. So about $5 per DLC. It's like,
Pretty good price, I think.
yeah, pretty good price. So I bought it, and so today I jumped into the first of the DLC, which was the Descent. I was afraid that it was going to be, um, I was over leveled, but I wasn't. It adjusted to what I was playing at, so I think that's good. It was a bit bullet. I would call, well, not bullet spongy because we're not FPS, but the enemies were pretty spongy. So there's that.
Yeah, they get kind of spongy towards the end, if I remember correctly. Although I will say that I think Descent was my favorite of the three DLCs. I think it's actually technically the second DLC.
Hmm.
I think the first one was the weird
It's
wild people.
yeah, Jaws of Hakon or Harkon, but the way somebody told me, it was like it. You have to be careful if you don't play them in a certain order, then you lock yourself out of the content.
No, if you play, it's not the either of the two you can play in any order. It's the last one, Trespasser, will lock you out of everything, all the other content,
Hmm.
because it's the finale.
Or no, I think it was I was under level for Jaws of Icon. I think you have to be like level 21 or 22, something like that. I'm right now level 20. I'm not really sure. I gotta check. And also, I just want to play the 10 because it has the deeper lore, right? I want to go back to the
Yeah,
young. So yeah, that's
and
what I want.
but that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed it. It has pretty good lore, and it raises some interesting things. I'm not entirely sure if they'll explore them later in later entries. You
Hmm.
never know.
Yeah, but I'm really having fun with it, and And so it's kind of, I mean, when you're doing streaming, sometimes I found there's a couple of games like, oh, you start playing the game, it's like maybe this game doesn't really fit my style. So it's like, oh well, I guess you gotta do what you gotta do, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I basically am gonna do a switch where I'm going to do Monster Hunt on the weekends, which is where goof off and all that. And I think it's a perfect game to doing that, just goofing off, and have games like this be the constant game that I'm playing. So now that I got that off my chest, let's talk about the news. And I think I'm gonna start with the latest news, which is Assassin's Creed is gonna take yet another break.
And
Uh,
honestly, I think that's pretty good news.
it is indeed. The reason they explained why there were two back-to-back Assassin's Creed games was that they had two studios working on them. So essentially, one just released one after the other, the way they were doing it before, right? But now they're basically saying it's I don't know why it's doing that. That they are going to essentially they are going to play it in a way that they're going to have a break a year or two. Whatever development time it takes to do the games, they're going to do that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's good. That's a good thing. I believe we brought it up last month or
Mm-hmm.
last week where we were talking about all this fatigue when it comes to certain franchises and certain genres of games. And actually, I think this is a good thing. You give the franchise a little rest, give it maybe bring on people, get more ideas, and really develop new concepts instead
Mm-hmm.
of just repeating the same thing over and over and just I don't know, just dressing it up differently
Mm-hmm.
each year.
Oh, yeah, makes sense. So that's good news for the Assassin's Creed. I don't know if I'm gonna play Odyssey or not. Again, I never really got into the original, and after that, I was like, well, why get? There's nothing really in the game that sort of calls me out. I mean, I like my stealth games, but I don't know why Assassin's Creed has never been a hit for me. So, in another piece of news, we have GOG says FCK DRM. They're starting a campaign and they're funding a campaign. Of course, these are the people also behind The Witcher and now Cyberpunk 2077. That essentially they're trying to educate the public on the hazards of DRM. And they're pushing forward the idea that, and something I push forward, and I think a lot of people I push forward, is that once you buy a game, you should own the game and you should play it in the best way possible. And that, as we explained in a previous show, DRM, which stands for Digital Rights Management, is there to manage the company's rights, not the consumer rights. And that seems to be the same token, the same position that CD Projekt Red has taken. As people know, Good Old Games, which is what the acronym GOG stands for, is a service just like Steam that does two things differently. They usually three things. Usually concentrate on older games, hence the term Good Old Games. They concentrate on having games. They have a certain level of curation, not perfect, but unlike Steam's hands-off approach. And finally, they have no DRM in any other games. So if you're gonna sell a game on GOG, it has to be DRM free. And I think part of the reason I think they want to be DRM free is that they want to expand their catalog. But especially a lot of games in late 1990s and started throughout the 2000s, they increasingly had DRM, and so playing them today, if you don't have the actual hardware or the CD keys or whatever they were using, becomes more harder and harder. And also, again, if Steam, for example, or someone else stops selling it, then and has that level of DRM, then that you can't use it anymore. You lose the game. But now I'm going to ask you this, Chabama. Do you think it's a cynical ploy by CD Projekt Red to distinguish GOG from Steam?
I think it is, especially given that I believe we brought it up again too last week, where Bethesda is kind of like, yeah, we're not going to put what was it? Wasn't it Fallout
Fallout
76
Fallout 76, yeah.
on the Steam? Like, nope, you can only get it on our website now for PC. It's just like, oh, so maybe this might be their first step to pushing a their own digital distribution
Mm-hmm.
platform. So maybe this might be GOG's way of trying to push their own. They have their own digital platform that makes it easy for you to kind of categorize your library and download your games directly from them.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't. You don't necessarily need to keep it running.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Yeah, I think it is that, and Steam is doing a couple of things on their own. So it is interesting how that would work. For example, Steam is now trying to apparently bring out Steam TV, which would be a rival to what else? Twitch. It seems that the latest Dota championship, they had a brief sort of somebody pressed the wrong button or something, and out went a signal about Steam TV, and people were like, "Oh, Steam TV is they're gonna be the ones who are doing the Dota games and all that." But according to Steam, they're like, "Well, no, really, it was a test, and essentially somebody pushed the wrong button. But don't worry about it. We're good. We're not gonna do that yet. But it's out there. People know it's out there. And
yeah, and of course this goes back to Steam introducing, what was it, like you can Steam certain Steam games on and let your friends watch directly.
Yeah.
So that might have been their way of dabbling into something like Twitch or a streaming service to let you your friends essentially watch you play. PlayStation has that built in too. You can invite people to come watch you play on other PlayStations, or you can ask someone like, "Oh, hey, my friend's playing God of War. Maybe they'll let me watch them play God of War." And you can request like, "Hey, can I watch you play?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think they're gonna be streaming stuff like Dota, which is still very popular, or the numbers have gone down for a while. Yeah, they're gunning for bigger things than just screen share or watch one one player watching another by invitation. I think it's a little bigger than that. And I think it fits with a lot of the strategies, I think, that Valve has been testing over the years, like the Steam Box and VR and stuff like that. They're moving away from being just a seller of games or maker of games, distributor of games, to being more like a Microsoft or Sony or something like that, right? Being the deliverer of the entire experience, especially the experience at home, right, or to your PC, right? And I think that fits that plan. Although the way Valve has been going on with these plans, it just seemed like they just simply shoot stuff out in the air. I was like, well, whatever lands, whatever doesn't, well, we'll move on. Which hasn't hurt Valve's bottom line yet, but we'll see. Also talking about Valve, it seems that they're at it again with adult games or games that may have adult content. They are quote unquote freezing these games and are putting controls in place to delay their release until they can check them out. A bit of curation, it seems, but only directed at adult games.
Well, I believe visual novels in general, just visual novels, but nothing else.
Yeah.
Just funny because I think a week or two ago, I haven't had a chance to play it. I purchased the visual novel that does advertise, hey, you can go to our website and download the not safe for work patch. So it's technically censored and perfectly fine for Steam until you actively go out there and patch it yourself.
which is par for the course, even for games, other games. I mean, you have an entire. Don't ask us how we know this, but we know this. Well, actually, Chumpamon's not going to tell you how he doesn't know it. His channel, that's what he does, or partly. There's a whole world of mods, adult mods for a bunch of games. Like, I stumbled, honestly, in patches for The Sims. And being an adult that I am, I checked them out and it was like, essentially anything and everything. I don't own The Sims, but you can see the screenshots. If you think that The Sims, all the woo woo they do is censored, not gonna be censored anymore. Which really would turn, I guess, The Sims into a sort of set of a life simulator into a adult life simulator. I guess if the focus is on the sex, then it's really like a porn movie simulator in a sense.
There's websites just dedicated to adult mods for certain games, especially like Skyrim. Skyrim is big, and there are people that make like just videos of their characters just boinking each other on Skyrim.
Yeah, and go beyond that.
Yeah. And then I don't think Steam's gonna take Skyrim down anytime soon.
No.
Like, oh no, people can mod this game to have adult content.
Yeah, and there's Gmod, which is Valve's own engine for Half-Life 2, and that has a lot of adult art and animation that goes with it.
Source filmmaker, everyone uses it to make adult films using imported models and whatnot.
Yeah. We also have a lot of news about. We talked about this earlier, and it seems that Nintendo is keeping the word. There's a lot of games coming for the Switch, and this later half of this year, they're doing a lot of ports from the Wii U, apparently. Spyro got delayed, but it's still gonna go out there. We also got confirmation that Dark Souls, which was had been delayed, but it's still gonna come out, and it's gonna come out, I think, with all the expansions, the original Dark Souls for the Switch, and they're planning to do Dark Souls 2 and 3 as well, so the whole series. So yeah, and the Switch seems to be the place where everybody's jumping with at least last generation PC and console games or early generation PC games, right? It's weird because we talked about last week about Nintendo's own take on older games and ROMs. But now the Switch seems to be like the modern machine to play not very old games, but rather sort of generation removed game. Oh, you want to play that game again, like Skyrim? You want to play that game, your Spyros? You want to play those games again in high HD? Don't bother having it in the PC. You can have it in the Switch and play them to go, right? Play your more recent memories of a generation ago or something like that on the Switch. That seems to be kind of the position that they're taking.
Yeah, then that's actually kind of interesting because if you think about it, it kind of gives maybe someone as busy as me time to like, oh hey, I got a few minutes, I can catch up and play this game that I've never had time to sit down and play.
Yeah, that seems to be the approach. Is almost like, and again, Nintendo does the things their own way, and I think with this Switch, they really hit it off. It's like the Switch is really all about fun and convenience, right? They're in a way of reinventing mobile gaming. I mean, they're always being strong in not in the mobile market, but in the portable market since the 1990s, right? With the Game Boy systems. So they already have that position and said, well, that's our strength, and now we're going to keep capitalizing on that strength. But I wonder how long can they keep it up? How many titles are out there that don't become increasingly obscure that people are like, uh, I don't really care for this anymore. Especially
Yeah,
especially at,
that's
at, at, at current prices. Like if you start asking like $40 plus for each new title because it's an HD remake or something like that, people might go like, yeah, maybe not.
hmm. Well, I think it's really gonna depend on us. It's like Bethesda said, like, why do we keep releasing Skyrim over on everything? Because you guys keep buying it.
Yeah,
So I think as long as there's a market, people are gonna keep buying it.
yeah,
And
definitely
then once people get sick of all these re-releases, they're gonna stop putting them out because no one's buying them.
makes perfect sense. And finally, I think it's the story that I think would be a very good transition to the story of the night, and that is well, it's a twofer. Let's start with the setup, and then we'll go to the pitch and see how it goes. Battlefield 5, that's EA's War FPS, now World War II FPS, and Battlefield 4 was Battlefield 1 actually, which was the rebranding of the series. Um, was in World War One, but Battlefield 5 is going to be in World War II. As far as pre-orders are concerned, they're not doing as well as they expected for such a big game. Now, here's the thing. We have essentially two schools of thoughts, or thought, not plural. There's a lot of thoughts in those schools, but there's only two schools of them, so it's two schools of thought. English, not my first language. Anyway, the first school of thought is the one would call the classic gamer types, like, well, they haven't tried to put the SJW things in those games, and maybe would people would buy them because historical accuracy, and so you having a revolt against that. We told you not to do that, and now players are sick and tired of that, and they don't want to do that. You're virtual signaling, blah blah blah. Then we have. I'm sorry if that offends you. Well, actually, I'm not sorry. That's just you. If you don't believe me, do you think this is a caricature of what I'm being?
Yeah,
Just go to
those people
YouTube.
exist.
Just go to YouTube. I mean, my mentions are full of this, by the way. So it's not like because I watch news and all that, and so they come up. I'm not. I wish I was exaggerating. I am not. Okay. The second school of thought, the one that is kind of based on historical accuracy and of modern sales trends and all that, and people who have been watching EA closely for a couple of years, including the two of us, is that yeah, the problem with Battlefield 5 are multiple, including the fact that EA has had a difficult time with an audience in the past couple of years with stuff with Battlefront and stuff like that. So they've been accruing again bad faith for a while. Some of it based on those HW, the perception of being virtual signaling and all that, but also basically bad consumer practices overall. And also that they're gonna launch a game in October in a very crowded field with particularly one game out there is going to be releasing in that same time, and also releasing for the PC for the first time, Red Dead Redemption 2, one of the most awaited games of 2018. Now, Angry Joe, Enfogonado Joe, Molesto Joe,
Enojado Joe.
Enojado Joe, how we say in Puerto Rican, Encojonado Joe. It basically he made a video about it and said, listen, it could be because of what people are saying in column A, but I've been around the block a couple of times, and I'm paraphrasing what he's saying. It could be, in fact, these other things, other decisions that EA has made about microtransactions and how people are not happy with EA and different products. I think Chavo sent me a video about one of their Madden games and how it was a complete messed up because of that, cards and all that. And so, when it's going to be dropped and that's not the first EA game that's suffered from scheduling problems. In fact, the year the Battlefield 1 dropped, they released the second game, the Titanfall 2, and while it was not a complete mess, it certainly suffered compared again as an FPS to the original Titanfall, which it did very well. Even though
Mm-hmm.
Titanfall 2 fixed a lot of the things that people were expecting in the original Titanfall, but it wasn't
Yeah.
enough, right? So he pointed that out, and I'm thinking that, and I haven't seen a lot of Angry Joe videos in a while because he's changed formats and all that, and people, I have my own thing now. I'm doing this as well, so
Yeah.
but I tend to agree with him, right? And also he talks about, and this is really the segue to tonight's subject. He talks about whether he says, because he made a reaction video to that video, well, reacting
Mm-hmm.
to people reacting to the video, says essentially the following: I can't make anybody happy, right? Some people accuse me of being a right wing reactionary because when I say certain things, some people react me as being a sort of an SJW, whatever. If I do something else, I can't please anybody, right? So I'm gonna just buckle down and do my own thing, right? I'm still gonna be, well, Angry Joe. That's his stick. That's what he does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that segue in tonight's theme of games journalism part 2? Is because the question that I'm going to pose to you, Chapel One, on the audience is, what exactly do we expect when we hear the word game news?
Well, game news, I think of anything that's hot and trending in the game industry in terms of what's coming out, or any kind of rumors of, hey, did you hear that so and so studios is making a new game?
Yeah, but are we expecting, or should we expect more? I mean, for example, we talked about I like to say, friendly, that she is a friend of the program and she's always welcome here if we can manage it. Laura K. Dale is one of those journalists who, in fact, actually does a bit of investigative journalism, right? She hunts down rumors, she gets sources, she talks about not only current releases, but what are the things that are going on with them, etc., etc. And I think the irony is, in today's environment, is the more actual journalism games journalists do, the more they get pillared for it,
Mm-hmm.
right? The deeper they go and the more investigations they do, and they talk about criticism, etc. Okay, I guess I have to put this in perspective, because game journalists comes from fandom, right?
Mm-hmm.
The back in the 1970s and 80s, when you started having the first publications, there were basically two types of publications. There were fan publications, which essentially were kind of like fan-made catalogs, saying, "Oh, these are upcoming games and stuff like that," and also started having reviews, right? So I started very early, right, with arcade games, and especially with when consoles like the Atari 2600 took off, because of course people wanted to know what they should buy for their consoles, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
came from the fans, right? People who love games, and we love games, and we're talking about it in this podcast, so we're part of that, and very much still is that, right? People who love games, who are fans of games, talk about games, and that brings a series of expectations with it. The other side of it is, of course, and you talk about upcoming games and stuff like that, is the industry side, right? Companies like
Yeah.
Nintendo and GameSpot and others put out their own publications. The old Nintendo Power, GameSpot has their own publication and stuff like that. And their attitude is now that they're delivering news, but the purpose of it is buy our games.
Yep.
So, and we also talked about the hype machine as well, like the rumors and stuff like that. In one hand, I think we still are very much in that fan mode. I mean, it's okay, we're doing it as a podcast, so we're talking about it, but as a whole, journalism as a whole is still in fan mode, and I think a lot of the audience and a lot of even their own so-called journalists see their job first and foremost as again, just announcers, right? It's
Yeah.
it's one of the reasons why E3 is still the biggest news in the calendar, right? And what is E3? Hype, 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 hype.
Yep. It's pretty much a gathering of studios and stuff kind of tooting their own horns.
And the journalists that are paid by their publications and encouraged by the companies to go there and watch these shows and fill in the seats, and they're the audience, right? And we know, of course, heard about reviews, reviewers getting exclusives and sent to a hotel to play the first 2 hours of it under supervision or stuff like
Or,
that.
or getting gifts, and that's a big one.
Yeah. And people say, oh, that's a problem. And it is a problem. Uh, but I think it's also an expectation because it is fan driven, right? Because there's another aspect of it is that it's access. If you don't play ball, it's harder to get access. Well, just talk about how you set up a game review. You can buy the game, but say at $60 a pop of a game, even a well-funded, publication or website will probably kind of run out of money real soon. I mean, how many games get released a year? AAA games alone, what, several hundred?
Yeah.
Right? And then you have to pay $60 each, plus everything else, right? And you probably would have to, play it when they come out.
Yeah.
So you're behind the curve because, again, that one of the problems is that you have to talk about the game as soon as it, before it comes out. You have to do the review. You have to do the thing to be on top of it, right? If you're not talking about it, people are going to go where people are talking about, right? So you need that access. So, and it's sort of mutually beneficial situation in which IGN drops in and has an interview with so on and so forth, or BioWare, or Ubisoft or whatever in their offices, and they get a tour, and they get it, and they make a sort of an interview and all that. You need access. Without that access, I think a lot of what we expect out of game journalism is not going to happen.
No.
But at the same time, the video game industry is still very much, and we talked about this before, very secretive. So getting at the real news of what things are really happening because of MDAs and because let's be honest, nobody wants to shit where they eat.
Yep.
Means that getting the facts on anything, even if it's just a simple release, is hard to do.
Oh, right? Yeah. Or criticizing practices of certain companies, or even like maybe being critical of their products.
Mm-hmm. And then I think finally, if a lot of people who are claiming, hey, we want real journalism, well, again, because a lot of the stuff is from fans, and we have the situation here with the recent plagiarism scandal on IGN.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they hired a YouTuber, essentially, right? Very few people who work in game journalism, particularly, have a, so that nobody does, but a lot of
journalism degree.
Exactly, they don't have. It's not a requirement. A requirement is: have you played games? Can you write effectively about them? Right?
Have you published anything?
Yeah.
Can we see your resume of work?
Yeah. Have you worked for other companies before? Right, and a lot of freelancing as well. And on that too, I told there's a reason why I talk about Angry Joe is that, and I think, and this is something that the late Total Biscuit would bring out, but I think he was wrong in this case. And I know, he's recently passed away a couple of months ago, so it's still wrong in the mind of it. But he would make this sort of distinction between old media and new media. But I don't think there's ever been a situation in video games where you can truly say it's old versus new, right? Because, in fact, the real explosion of games media happened with the internet in the 1990s and the 2000s. Blogs, websites with video or audio, with YouTube. at least the way we get our news and podcasts and all that, that's always been part of the partial. So whether it's IGN making a very select video or me just in front of a camera just talking to it or whatever, aside from production values, perhaps there's not really a lot of difference either, right?
No.
Which again comes from sort of the fact that it's fans talking about media, right? So, and when we actually get stuff that is critical of, and we talked about this in part of reviews, and now I think one we talk about it as well as news, is that when we see journalism, part of journalism, first of all, is to be fair, although not necessarily balanced. Well, two things are not the same thing. Approach things critically and give us the real scoop and how things are happening. And the kind of news that I'm more interested in these days are things like, work conditions in the industry, right? How games are really made, what are the difficulties and the interesting things, business models and the changing therein, consumer company relationships, and how companies see consumers and how consumers are see themselves and companies, right? And a host of other things. One of the interesting things I think would be, for example, I saw a series of videos today. I didn't finish it. Called Parasocial Relationships, and I think we haven't really seen a lot of coverage in the game journalist space about how companies, especially video game companies, create these and exploit, video games didn't start with this, but they're very good at exploiting it and creating them, parasocial relationships with, say, for example, video game characters, right? And we talk about sort of manipulating and exploiting, how people feel about certain characters and shipping and all that. And that's something I think the media itself doesn't go into much. Perhaps they're not even aware of it. But I think it would be it's central to how we deal with the art form as well as with the everything about video games, really, like how video games are constructed and presented to the audience and stories and all that. But we don't really see a lot of that in the video game space from the journalist, right? We don't necessarily see that deep set analysis. We see it from some corners of the internet, some YouTubers and all that. But even then, you gotta navigate deep and all that. And then of course there is political position. We starting seeing some magazines like Kotaku, for example, who have basically said we are X, Y, and Z politically. Now, in the video game space and in American journalism in general, that is very rare. In other countries, and that wasn't always the case, but the tradition has been that, say, you have a newspaper will say, okay, our position is center left, center right, far left, terms like progressive, liberal, conservative, economically conservative, socially liberal, that sort of thing. And basically wearing their worldview and their biases on their sleeve. And I think because, as Angry Joe has said, you're going to be accused of being whatever anyway.
Yeah.
I would like to see at least more publications embracing those views, not pushing them, but if somebody says, "Oh, you're this," it's like, okay, this is my FAQ on as an individual within the media or as a member of this, this editor or director or owner of this. This is our social position. This is our economic position. These are the things that we're going to champion, right? This is what we're doing. If you feel that that's what you're comfortable with, then you're welcome. If you feel that you're not comfortable with that, then there are other options. I won't show you the door, but there's other options. I think that would help a lot in sharpening those things, and also make it easier to find at least the kind of deep analysis I'm looking for, and the real news, as it were, right? Because I'm the kind of person that I see a game oh, that game is gonna come up. Okay, and in Spanish we say echo un vistazo. Sort of get a look at it and go like, okay, it might come out this year, whatever. Fine. And I may get excited about it, maybe not, but usually I don't. I'm much newer to the hype, but that seems to be just the bulk of what media still is. Hype machine. It's part of the hype machine, and I think the criticism that is leveled at it comes from some interesting things, but others as well. And also, I think talk about again, Angry Joe. The one, why do we have, and let's tape it off, the rise of the angry reviewer or the angry YouTuber?
Because people have been burned
Mm-hmm.
by their purchases, by essentially buying into the hype. A lot of these media things, they're meant to get you to buy things, just to buy these products. Like my experience with like gaming was when I was young, we didn't have money for a lot of games or any kind of like disposable income. Like my cousins and I, every time we go to a grocery store, we would go to like the magazine racks and just kind of like look at magazines in there and like, oh, look at like this game looks interesting. Like, wouldn't it be cool to play this? That was our only way to like knowing, hey, these games exist. These games might be fun to play. Is whatever we saw in these magazines or in TV commercials. And let's just say like if we ever did manage to save up money, and we'd always have to buy it used because we're like really dirt cheap because we were broke. We'd have to invest a lot of money into getting a new game, either like saving up through allowances and doing chores and whatnot. And of course, being from one family, the consoles all shared, so the video games all belong to us. Or our biggest thing was rentals too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like oh, which game should we rent? Oh, hey, this game looks interesting. Let's rent that.
Yeah.
And so that's where to kind of conclude, like that's where like the angry reviewers come. Is like we bought into like these articles, these ads, and then it's like we finally got this. We got so excited, we got the item, and then we open the box up and there's a turd in it.
Yeah, and that lack of trust. But I think there's another completely, and it's games journalism and news is reflective of that, of sort of the discussion within games about what games are or should be, right? And again, this is also part of reviews as well. We talked about last week, and I sort of repeat that. I think when you go into that deeply that way is the discussion of should game journalists be about consumer protection, right? As consumer advocacy versus being an expression of analysis and expression of the art of gaming, right? It's the difference between a catalog that goes, magazine that covers the latest paintings, right, versus a quick blurb in the newspaper about the movie reviews of the week, right? What should I watch? Consumers like, oh, this is a good movie, this is a bad movie, watch it, don't watch it, that sort of thing. And I think, and this is where it's sort of the sort of HAW and all that, political, pseudo. I say pseudo political. People are just throwing terms around, and they don't usually mean what they think they mean. Is a reflection of that, right? People don't really have the right language for it, so they use this as their thing, right? I believe that one and the other go hand in hand, right? Because like we talk about reviews, you can have your reviews which are primarily buy, don't buy, right? And you can have news that tells you, oh, this is what's happening now, the very, very first facts. But also, I think we can have more news. We have more, investigative reporting. We can have in-depth reviews. We can have in-depth analysis. That also goes into the idea that video games are art. And if you're really looking for a complete, my ideal magazine, online magazine, or video magazine, whatever, would have all of that, right?
Yeah.
It would have your news, but I think would try to focus more on hard news versus hype. Like, this is what we
Yeah.
know, this is what we think we know, this and that. You will have your reviews, of course, basically focus on the consumer, but also on, whether or not this is a good game or not. And then we'll also have deeper criticism of not only games as an art form, but also criticism of the industry and the media and all the elements of it, including fellow other magazines and other reviewers, um, the games, the companies, and dare say it, the people who play them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's another thing. It's like, I believe that because video games come from the fandom, right? When video games publications started sort of turning the mirror back into their fandom, there was a sense of, hey, you belong to us. You're no different than we are. Why you're attacking us?
Yeah.
And the reaction then has come from game journalism saying, oh no, well, the thing is that we are not you. We're different. Which then fed into the, oh, you're being elitist pricks, who are just in your high horses looking down on us. Even though you wouldn't exist if we were not present. And so again, that's another thing that feeds the sort of antagonistic position between some aspects of the game community and game journalism. How would you respond to that? How would you try to fix that if you were, all of a sudden you're Chapelmon, the editor of X Games magazines? What would you do?
Oh my God. So I think, wow.
It's a big
So
question.
I think, yeah, I would think that I would try to be active. So it'd be hard. I think what my idea is probably impractical, but I would try to be active among the fans. I would try to also kind of gauge, like kind of step out and look at our whatever publication I'm working in and be like, how are we being viewed? And maybe go out there and talk to our fans and try to not become so jaded, I guess. And I think that goes with any kind of job, is just try not to get jaded. And if you do become jaded, maybe it's time for a change. Maybe you shouldn't be in whatever industry you're in. But ultimately, maybe also be responsive to criticism and listening, and always listen to feedback and see where you can improve, where you or where like some of the criticism is kind of invalid, because you're always going to get those too.
Mm-hmm.
People that saying, oh yeah, you're terrible because you guys are terrible. That doesn't help you.
Yeah, the old fashioned, it's only an opinion. It's an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is another thing is as well, I think, because game journalism works a lot with hype in many ways.
Yeah, you can't. There's no room for opinions too in terms of journalism. There's no like opinion column. I don't. And today I even had this thought. I'm like, I really should try to see if I still have like. Again, it goes back to not having a lot of disposable income as a youth, but I remember we enjoyed looking at like video game publications. Just like, oh, I remember one of the big ones that we loved was called Tips and Tricks, because it would have cheats. It would be have as the same implies, tips and tricks on how to beat games, how to get through them, and especially like having rentals being your primary source of gaming. It's like, well, we got to make good use of that time.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can cheat, we can get through parts that we are having trouble. We'll go ahead and do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember having a publication, and sometimes I would actually sit down and read some of the articles. And I remember mine had like something about like Mortal Kombat, like Ultimate Mortal Kombat for the Sega Genesis and
Mm-hmm.
the Super Nintendo and whatnot. And I'd always get like we just get so excited about like, oh, look at these games are coming out, and some of these articles they would just talk about like, oh yeah, these games are coming out, and uh, they talk about some of the development and stuff. I remember reading about like how they also brush up on the topic like, oh yeah, Ed Boon, like he's pretty much like the creator of Mortal Kombat. I think somewhat it was probably embellished there, and how Midway started and whatnot. So those were always interesting facts to learn.
Hmm.
But I'm in terms of I can't really think of any kind of like forms of opinions and whatnot.
That's I never actually thought about having magazines have a clear sort of opinion page or editorial page,
Yeah,
right?
I mean they'd always have like the letters from fans and whatnot, and then they might talk about or they might respond to them, but obviously those are always going to be hand selected.
Of course, yeah. I mean, you don't want to slam yourself too hard, you know. Yeah, but I think an editorial page would be a thing. But the thing again, it doesn't. Editorial pages really don't fit the sort of fast pace competitiveness of we need to have the latest news and
Oh
having
yeah,
sort of
I
thing.
mean there's no way those would obviously now we'd have to translate those to a website and a blog and
Mm,
whatnot. I mean publications now unfortunately they're pretty much dead,
yeah.
or they're a dying medium. But I even so I kind of vaguely recall this thing that I remember at PlayStation or Xbox Live had something similar, like from IGN. They made like videos for Xbox and whatnot. And PlayStation had this weird public, like video interactive publication thing called Core with a Q. I
Mm,
believe that's what it was called because I got a few free ones from having uh, the PlayStation Plus subscription.
mhm,
But this was something else you had to subscribe to, and it's essentially like a monthly publication in video form,
mhm.
and it's like, oh hey, we're discussing these topics, and you get to click on them, and it's like it'll pull up a video. It's like, oh, we got an interview with so and so, and hey, what's the hottest news about like this upcoming game and whatnot.
Mhm.
It was pretty interesting. The quality, like it had a pretty good high production value to it too. So that was probably an attempt of trying to kind of evolve that medium of like game publication. Of course, eventually they shut down.
Mhm. And it's also driven by a company, which is Sony or
Yeah.
Microsoft. So they're going to push what basically they're still going to see it as a way to advertise their games and their platform.
Hmm.
So, they have that in. But I think you could do a video editorials, right?
Yeah.
I
Well,
think,
a lot of YouTubers do that.
yeah, so basically, myself included, that's what I've done, in a way. Um, but make it as a feature of, say, your magazine or your position, your Kotakus and all that. Well, I
Hmm.
probably have to go back. And again, it's also the way the web works is like when people don't go usually to Kotaku and read Kotaku, right?
Yeah.
They're looking for something or there's a news in their browsers, whatever, and go like, oh, this article in Kotaku talks about this, or in Polygon or Games Radar or PC Gaming or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this
And
is
I
video.
do that too. Like
So yeah.
I don't have the time to sit down and click on every single article and sit there and read it. I'm a busy person. Actually, just like today, I like to go to what is it, PlayStation Lifestyle, and I actually saw like some game I didn't know existed. I'm like, hey, that looks like a cute game, and it's like Detective Gaio.
Mhm.
It's a little point and click adventure that's cartoony with like a detective rooster guy. I'm like, hey, that's a game I didn't know exists, and I might actually be interested in picking up.
Yeah, so I think part of the struggle, I think we're going to finish with this note, is that it's format, right?
Mm-hmm.
The jump from it was never really a feature. These things like editorials and stuff like were never really a feature of print versions of magazines. Again, because of the fandom and all that, and people were just more interested in news. I'm sure a lot of them did have some kind of editorial, but mostly it was like, "Hey, how you doing?" It's more like a preface than anything else, right?
Yeah, there was and if I remember, one of the things that was in there was this bizarro, like almost like fan comic thing that it was like picture and like digital cutouts of like some guy having a dream, and he's like going through like different video games and fighting and stuff. He wakes up and then like I think like there's like some cop video game lady who's like, oh hey, in his dream I think he kills Kirby or something, and he's like, we're investigating like the murder of this like little pink guy. Like, do you know anything?
Yeah, I think we're still very much in a transitional period, format wise, because of technology. So I think it's that also. It's something that I don't see anybody really sort of. I mean, there's some attempts like the Escapists, like IGN and others, to try to wrangle all this together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're doing blogs, well now it's video, but it's long form video, long short video, is streaming, is this and that. So ultimately, I think we have to, just like when we talk about reviews and games journalism, has to expand. It doesn't necessarily have to abandon itself, but it has to expand itself. And some publications really have to go, okay, we're the publication going to talk seriously about consumer issues. We're the publication going to talk about politics in video games. Video games as art, and maybe find ways to have a stronger editorial voice, because we hear about editors, but especially in video game journalism, they're the people on the behind going like, oh, you do this, do that, you got the assignment, but they don't seem to have their own in front of the camera or the podcast, whatever format or formats, a strong voice, which I think would certainly help the audience know where to go and what to do.
Wasn't the plagiarist guy supposed to be an editor or something too?
Yeah, well, he got fired. Yeah,
yeah.
so that's the
I'm
thing.
like, well, I mean, he did camera work. Well, that was his. Wasn't that his first video for that?
Yeah,
for IGN, and I think he wrote publications for them up to then.
But there's that. So yeah, we're gonna leave it here for tonight. I'd like to apologize for the delays, of course. We were trying different things, and we're still getting drop frames. Although, according to OBS, it's
better now.
It's supposed to be better, but still getting those frames. I think it's just either OBS doesn't like video format like this, or maybe something else. Maybe it's Zoom. But we'll try different things and see what works. But for now, Chapelmon, where can we find you on the interwebs?
You could find me at Chapelmon pretty much anywhere. I'm Chapelmon on YouTube, and I am Chapelmon_Aragon on Twitch and Twitter.
And you can find me here on the Lessons Learned 1 channel. We're going back to the basics, which are RPGs. We're playing Dragon Age Inquisition with all the DLC. And I'm looking forward to continuing both with Monster Hunter World, usually in the weekends. And I'm looking for other games that I may play. There's a Bard's Tale remake that came out, and I'm seriously thinking maybe that's a thing I might play in the near future. But for now, as always, we'll see you when we see you. Have a good night.
Good night.